And welcome to our meeting on Wednesday, May the 8th. And a very warm welcome to you all, wherever you are on the planet. As always, I'm in the hot seat here as host, Mike Wozniak, theatre photographer based in Suffolk in the UK. You know all this stuff. Sheeta is here, of course, and will act as moderator through this session. Sheeta, was there anything that you'd like to say at this point?
Just welcome everyone, and thank you, Nick, for joining us today.
Thank you very much. And our president, Eckhart, of course, is with us and has already said that he said his piece already. So uh, I'm I'm assuming you have nothing more to say at this moment, Eckhart.
Eckhart is
I'll
muted,
take that as
so
a
okay,
no.
take that as a no.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Uh,
Yes, I think I said
that's all
enough. So
right.
welcome everyone. I'm looking forward to Nick's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Guys, just my normal reminders at this point that everything that you could possibly need to know about our organization is available from the NMUG website. I have this morning started a new thread on the message board specifically for today's meeting. So if you have comments or questions or anything else after the event, if you'd kindly post them in that thread, for no other reason that it's nice and tidy and everything is kept together, that would be lovely. A couple of announcements. Um, Hopefully you all know this by now, but we are planning next month a couple of beginners classes. Dan, who is running the classes, has asked me to change the order of them. So Saturday, June the 15th will be the date for the Mac operating system beginners class. And that will start at 10 a.m. and run for 2 hours. And the following Saturday, June the 22nd, will be the iPad operating system class. And that will run also from 10 a.m. to midday. I mentioned this last week. I feel like I ought to sing a Disney song at this point. Which I won't, Sheeta, because I know about copyright issues. Um, we would love to see some guests along. It's been a long time since we started a heavy push to ask you, our fabulous members, to invite your friends along to our meetings. They are always welcome, always welcome. In the email that you would have received with the Zoom address for today's meeting in, Dan has indicated how we can go about that and what the process is. But basically, anybody is welcome. All we ask them to do is introduce themselves and give us their email address when they join us. So please do get out there, get as many people along as you possibly can. One little thing, and that is that although we welcome guests, our classes are not open to guests. So if you have friends who are beginners who want to come along to our beginners classes, we will need them to join NMUG.
Mike, before
Um,
you go further, I want to say that we do have a guest, Pat Cates, and I want to personally welcome Pat Cates to our meeting today.
Fantastic.
And okay, thank you. Mhm.
Hi, Pat. Um, yes, again, just repeating from last week, but some really, really important information about next season. One of the issues for us about inviting guests is the fact that we're using the same Zoom address for each of our meetings at the moment. That will change from September when each meeting will have its own separate, different Zoom address. So we all need to kind of get this lodged into our heads so that we pick up the email that Dan will send out, or we pick up that address from the website. So thank you. That's about it. Just to say that next week, Mike Matthews is with us and we'll be talking about maps and doing a bit of a deep dive into the maps application and just levering as much as possible out of it. So that's next, same place, same time next Wednesday, which brings us to Mr. Bhatt. And Nick has, I guess, in the 2 years now nearly that I've been a member of NMUG, the most extraordinary CV that I've had the pleasure of sharing. So forgive me while I read this, but I think it's important to know. Nick is an 18-year veteran of Apple and knows more about image editing than most of us could possibly imagine. His roles in the Photo Apps group included Senior Director of Engineering and Chief Technical Officer. He also led the raw camera and core image teams, as well as the imaging team for the Mac version of Photos. So there can be no one on the planet that knows more about photos than he, which is fantastic. And it's so good to see you today, Nick, and thank you very much indeed for joining us. In 2016, he set up his own software development company called Gentleman Coders. He holds 55 patents in a wide range of disciplines, including image processing, audio processing, geotagging, wireless networking, and user interface design. And it is my great pleasure to introduce him today and learn more about his latest extraordinary. I've been playing with it for a few days and I absolutely love it. Image editing application. With that, Nick, I will stop my share so that you can take over.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate it. I then promptly skipped my slide on my introduction because you did such a great job. So I will now share my screen. And so what I thought I would do today is, so I think you can see that.
Yes, we can. Yes.
I thought I'd do today is cover a couple of different things. So rather than, for example, just demonstrate the application, I thought I'd actually go a little bit into some topics of image editing that may be of interest to people. And so, then I'll do that first. So the About Me slide, I said I've skipped that. I didn't edit that. I missed that one. But basically, I want to start talking about image formats because they're very important in terms of understanding the kind of the pros and cons of them to some extent in terms of choosing one or what they're good at and what they're not good at. There's a lot of what I'd say is sort of misinformation. There's people, when I get emails from people, I get some emails from people where they're not clear on some of the specifics and why it matters. A little bit about XMP and image editing apps and how that works, and then the Nitro app itself. Image formats, so let's see, let me look here just quickly. And so I'm not seeing the chat window, so I'm not sure why that is, but maybe you'll have to just tell me.
Do you need to see the chat for questions?
I don't need to see it right now. No, sometimes there's a little bit. That's fine.
No, I'll take care of it. Yeah, okay.
That's fine. Okay. So let's start with JPEGs. Everyone knows and loves JPEGs. Everything supports it. That's what's great about it. Camera-generated JPEGs can look quite nice, require minimal editing. It's an old format, but it's held up surprisingly well. It is very good for viewing and sharing, but it's actually not a great format for editing images. And I'll explain why in a second. So the first thing about JPEG that is important to understand is that they're compressed. And I think everyone knows they're compressed, but they're compressed in a way that loses information. And that's one of the reasons why JPEG files are so small, is that they eliminate some information, which the design of it is meant to be sort of things you probably wouldn't notice. And that's generally true, and the quality of the compression will affect how much information is discarded. The problem is, if you start with a JPEG and you make some edits to it, and you make it, say, a new JPEG, you're going to introduce artifacts. You're going to introduce errors because you're starting with an image that's lost some information through the compression process. So you're going to then process that with missing some information, and then you're going to store it again and end up again losing more information. So each time you do that, the actual file degrades. And so JPEG is a good storage format. It's a good final format, but it's not a good format if you're going to edit images. The other thing that's interesting and confusing is something called gamma correction. And JPEGs are always gamma corrected. And I'll tell you about gamma correction briefly. So gamma correction is meant to solve a problem about the way our eyes function. Our eyes are not linear. We see dark areas better than we see bright areas. So when you're looking in a dark scene, we'll pick up the variations in shadows with great precision. But our ability to see bright areas is actually not the same. And that's just how our eyes have evolved. So the way a computer might represent values, color values, or brightness values is not the same way that our eyes would represent or our brains would represent those values. And so gamma correction is basically an equation, a mathematical equation, which is trying to make an image looks similar to the way it does to us when we see it in the real world. And that's great. And it helps a lot with making images look attractive, but it actually causes problems when you want to image edit. So as I mentioned, they stretch the dark values and compress the bright values. So anytime you're going to stretch or compress things, you're changing the relationship between the numbers. So when you saw a nice smooth ramp here at the bottom, so these are, these are just different ways of representing the same information. You get a smooth looking ramp, but it's bad for editing. And so the way I show that is, here's a number line, and all the numbers are equally, separated, equally apart. And when you're going to do math, if you're going to add numbers together, you want to go from equal unit to equal unit. But a gamma corrected thing is going to look like that. So it's going to squeeze things in one direction and stretch things in another direction. So when you start trying to do mathematical operations, you're kind of hopping in between values. You're not moving smoothly between them, which is what you would do if the numbers were equally spaced. And so gamma corrected images are stretched in certain areas and squashed in other areas. So it makes it difficult to do precision editing. So JPEGs are fine for doing things like cropping because you're not doing any operation to the color values. You're just, viewing a different part of the image. But anytime you're going to actually change the color values, so you're going to, brighten it or darken it or, add a vignette or anything like that. Now you're working with numbers that are not equally spread apart. And so the results of them are not as good as they could be if the values were linear. So the combination of gamma correction and lossy compression is what makes a format like JPEG not ideal for editing. Again, cropping is fine, and sharing and viewing, those things, they're great for those kinds of things. There's a newer format that I'm sure most of you heard of called HEIF, or sometimes it's referred to as HEIC, but that's harder to pronounce.